There are moments in a person's life when everything changes at once. Not gradually, not quietly, but all at once, like a dam breaking open after years of silent pressure. For Wolfgang Van Halen, that moment didn't arrive with a crowd's roar or a platinum record. It arrived in stillness. It arrived in grief. And what emerged on the other side of that silence has left the music world completely stunned. Because what the world is witnessing right now is not just a musician releasing records. It is a full human transformation, and it is happening in real time, in front of everyone. Wolfgang Van Halen, once known almost exclusively as the son of a guitar god, has become something the industry rarely produces anymore. A completely self-made artist carrying the full weight of his own name. And the world is finally starting to pay attention. To understand what makes this transformation so extraordinary, you have to go back to where it began. Wolfgang William Van Halen was born on March 16, 1991, in Santa Monica, California, to rock musician Eddie Van Halen and actress Valerie Bertinelli. From the very first breath, the story of his life was already being written by other people. He was destined to be a footnote in someone else's legend. He was the son, the heir, the kid who had everything handed to him. That's what the world decided before he ever picked up an instrument. Wikipedia. But the reality inside the Van Halen household was far more complicated and far more human than the mythology suggested. Eddie was a genius, but not a natural teacher. Wolfgang has said that he did not know his father was a famous musician until he started picking up CDs and saw his father's picture on them. That detail alone speaks volumes. This was not a child raised to be a celebrity. He was raised to be a person first. The stage, the legacy, the weight of a famous last name, all of that came later. And when it came hard. Wikipedia. Wolfgang Van Halen launched his career around the age of 16 when he was tapped by his father Eddie to become the bassist in the family business, legendary rock band Van Halen. To outsiders, this looked like the ultimate golden ticket. To Wolfgang, it was the beginning of the most complicated chapter of his young life. Because the moment he stepped onto that stage, he stopped being a teenager and became a target. Critics didn't hear his talent. They heard nepotism. Fans of the original lineup didn't see a gifted young musician. They saw the kid who had taken Michael Anthony's place. The boy who had been given what others had earned. Music connection. He endured it. Night after night, city after city, he took the stage and played through the noise. He proved himself with every note, even when the world refused to acknowledge it. And then, just as he was beginning to carve out a reputation of his own, everything fell apart in the worst possible way. After his father died in 2020, which led to the disbanding of Van Halen, he began to focus on his solo project Mammoth, in which he performs all instruments and vocals. But calling it a solo project almost undersells what that decision actually meant. It meant sitting alone in a studio in the wreckage of loss and deciding to build something from scratch. It meant playing every drum, every bass line, every guitar riff, recording every vocal take completely alone. It meant choosing creation over collapse, even when collapse felt far more deserved. Wikipedia. The debut album that came out of that darkness was released in 2021 under the name Mammoth WVH. The band name is a reference to one of the early names of his father's first band, Mammoth, which eventually evolved into Van Halen. The choice was deliberate, deeply personal, and quietly symbolic. He wasn't erasing his father's story. He was picking it up from the very beginning and carrying it forward on his own terms. And the music that emerged from that decision was something no one saw coming. Wikipedia. His debut album Mammoth WVH was released in 2021, and he was nominated for a Grammy Award in the category of Best Rock Song for his song Distance, written when his father was dealing with complications from cancer. Eddie cried when he first heard it. A son writing a song for a dying father. A father hearing it and weeping. That is not a marketing story. That is a human story, the kind that cuts through all the noise and reaches something universal in the listener. Distance became a #1 hit on the Billboard Hard Rock chart and announced to the world that Wolfgang Van Halen was not a legacy act. He was an artist. Wikipedia. Van Halen played all of the instruments and performed vocals on each of his 3 records. He was inspired by Dave Grohl's work as the sole member in the early years of Foo Fighters. He wanted to see if he could write and record a record on his own and not have it sound like it was one person. That ambition, that stubborn refusal to take the easy path, became the defining characteristic of everything he has done since. When he could have hired session musicians, he played everything himself. When he could have leaned on famous collaborators for credibility, he stood alone. The result is a body of work that is unmistakably, undeniably his. Music Connection. On the heels of a debut that included a Grammy nomination, #1 debuts on multiple charts, television performances, and sold-out shows over a 2-year span, Mammoth WVH returned with a sophomore album Mammoth 2 in 2023. And where the debut was defined by grief, this record was defined by growth. From the rocking opener to the Beatles-esque fade on the closer, Mammoth 2 showcased the development of Wolfgang as a songwriter, musician, and especially as a vocalist. That word, especially as a vocalist, matters more than people realize. Because, for most of his early career, Wolfgang had been defined by what his hands could do. Now the world was discovering what his voice could do, and it was something entirely unexpected. Premier guitar. But the musical transformation was only one part of what was happening. Around the same time, Wolfgang was undergoing a deeply personal physical transformation that was just as hard-won and just as authentic. He revealed a weight loss journey alongside discussing his new album and his struggles with anxiety attacks. He said he was tired of feeling uncomfortable, that he had been heavy for years, and realized it wasn't just about looking good. It was about feeling good physically and mentally. That realization, simple and honest, became the foundation of a change that was as much about the mind as it was about the body. Rolling Stone New York University. After several months of commitment to a new routine, he described the experience by saying it felt like a switch had flipped, that he felt more alive than he had in years, with more energy on stage and a new sense of confidence. He was clear that he didn't do it for anyone else. He did it for himself. In a culture obsessed with celebrity appearances and performative wellness, that kind of quiet, personal motivation is rare. It is also, perhaps, the reason the transformation stuck. He wasn't chasing an image. He was reclaiming a feeling. University of Virginia. The physical and the musical transformations fed each other in ways that became visible to anyone watching his live performances. Sold-out shows produced observers who noted he put on incredible performances, with buildings packed to capacity night after night. The frontman who once admitted to sitting in dressing rooms wondering if he could even do this had become something else entirely. Someone who owns a stage not because of his last name, but because of everything he has poured into earning that right. Van Halen News Desk. Then came the moment that announced his arrival in a completely different world. In 2024, Wolfgang Van Halen was one of the guitarists in the live performance of I'm Just Ken at the 96th Academy Awards. Standing on one of the most-watched stages on the planet, performing alongside Ryan Gosling, he stepped into a moment that had nothing to do with his father, nothing to do with Van Halen, nothing to do with legacy or grief. It was pure, joyful, unexpected presence. A rock musician at the Oscars, playing a pop song for a Barbie movie, and somehow making it feel completely natural. Wikipedia. That moment crystallized something that had been building for years. Wolfgang Van Halen was no longer being defined by where he came from. He was being defined by what he does. He has spoken candidly about the complicated feelings people have about him because of his family and how he started out, acknowledging that many people decided how they felt about him and his music before they even heard it. That awareness of the bias, of the ceiling, of the predetermined verdict, could have made him bitter. Instead, it made him strategic. It made him determined to keep creating work so undeniable that even the skeptics would have to reckon with it. Billboard. And now, in 2025, he has done exactly that. The third studio album, titled The End, was released on October 24th, 2025, with all writing, vocals, and instrumentation handled solely by Wolfgang Van Halen. The reviews that followed were unlike anything he had received before. Metal Insider called it a masterpiece and said Wolfgang had outdone himself. Classic Rock said he had added another compelling entry to a remarkable resume. Another reviewer noted that while the title may sound ominous, it really sounds like Van Halen is just getting started. Wikipedia, just getting started. After 3 albums, a Grammy nomination, sold-out world tours, an Oscars performance, a marriage, a physical transformation, and a lifetime of fighting to be seen as his own person. Just getting started. In dropping the WVH from the band name and becoming simply Mammoth, he explained that the change was meant to reflect a higher chance of organic discovery, where people hear something and get an unbiased reaction before they see who it is. That instinct, to let the music speak before the name does, is the same instinct that has driven every decision he has made since his father passed. Lead with the work. Let the work be enough. Let the work be everything. Billboard. He has spoken about the heavy absence left by his father, describing it as a black hole that sits there even now. He has said that Eddie never got to see what happened with Mammoth, never got to see him get married, never got to see him eventually have children, and that those moments will always carry a tinge of sadness no matter what. That grief is not something he has moved past. It is something he has moved with. It lives in his music, in the album names, in a studio his father built with his own hands where every Mammoth record has been made. The loss is present in every note, not as a wound, but as a foundation. Tuco News. What Wolfgang Van Halen is doing is not just making rock music. He is doing something far more difficult and far more rare. He is transforming loss into legacy. He is taking a name that the world assumed would always belong to someone else and making it his own. He is proving, album by album, show by show, pound by pound, that transformation is not about erasing who you were. It is about becoming fully and unapologetically who you were always meant to be. The world is watching, and for the first time, is watching Wolfgang Van Halen. Not Eddie's son, not the kid who replaced Michael Anthony, not the guy who showed up at the Oscars, but Wolfgang Van Halen, the artist, the frontman, the force of nature who built himself from the inside out. And if what we've seen so far is any indication, this transformation is only just beginning.